Alright guys, this is my X-shot eliminator. If you've not seen the mod video for that, the link will be in the description. It's pretty cool. I like the way the paint has turned out. You can't really tell in this light. If you watch the original video, you'll see how that came out. And I wanted to replicate something similar and also potentially do some kind of loadout thing with it. So with that in mind, I found two X-shot RapidFires at a car boot sale, you know, about £1 each to be honest, and I wanted to match these up to the Eliminator in both colour and performance. I have modified this one internally already, which is why this bit's loose, because I haven't clipped it back in, because I need to take it apart so I can paint it up. And then I'm going to do this one step by step, and hopefully you can follow along if you want to. It's not a bad little thing. It will fit Nerf darts, and the rotation mech is a bit finicky. Sometimes it misses a chamber, but you can always rotate it back by hand. 6 shots, all random Nerf darts. You've got Rebel and things like that in there, so we'll see what it can do. That's 6. So yeah, the shed's about 35 feet away. I reckon I can do better. Let's try this version. Is it gonna miss? Come on. No, something's jammed. Ah, that's jammed. And again. So more poke but less accuracy. I'm going to try that one more time just because it is a bit windy today. So again, 6 shots, random Nerf. Not getting that one back. And then just quick 4 shots on the stock just to show. That was random. Oh, skipped. Skipped again. Yeah. Weird. Having modified this one, there's something I'm not going to do on this one, which is to take the dart pegs out completely. I'm literally just going to shorten them rather than taking them out, because what's happening on this one is occasionally the dart goes too far back and it jams the rotation mechanism up. So if I just take the peg out and leave the back, then that'll stop the dart from going too far back, which I'm going to do to this one. It's actually very simple. Literally all I've done is, as I said, I've taken the dart pegs out, I've taken the air restrictor out, I've increased the spring, and I've increased the seal. So it's about as basic as it gets. So yeah, as I say, I've modified this one, I haven't modified this one. We'll go through this step by step, and then, you know, if we get a nice bit of weather, we'll start painting it up so it looks a bit more like the Eliminator, and then we can have a matching set. So that'll be nice. Right, so the first major issue with this gun is this blue thing. It's not split down the middle so it comes across with, it comes out with the 2 halves. It's actually clipped in after. I can show you that better on the other one. It comes off as one piece, you see. So you have to get that out. Now you can lever it out. It's just a little clip. Get a decent screwdriver in there and pop it. or you can undo the screws, and then once it starts coming apart, then you can just lever it out. So that's the first thing to be aware, that's the first thing to remove. Alright, and then it's a matter of undoing all the screws on the green bit, and that'll give you access to the bit you want. Okay, don't worry about undoing the screws on the handle yet, just undo the screws on the green bit, and then that'll separate, because the handle is separate from the green section, so that makes life a little easier. When it comes to doing the cylinder mod and taking that apart, then you will need to take the handle apart, but just to get at the spring and the air restrictor, you can just get away with taking the green bit off, so we'll do that next. Now, just to show you, you just get a screwdriver and you get it in the front of the blue thing, and you should be able to literally push and pop. Now that can be a bit finicky. If that is going to be a problem, then literally take that apart, take the screws out of the green bit, lever that ever so slightly, and then you'll be able to get that out a little easier. But again, it is the first bit that has to come out. It will only fit back in one way, because the shape of the splodge is actually carved into the green. I have seen somebody suggest that that's a good place to put a tack rail if you wanted to. I'm not a fan of that. As I say, I want to go with the same look as the Eliminator, so I'm going to keep the splodge as is and just paint it the appropriate colour. So that's that bit, and then all we have to do now is take the screws out. Job's a good one. Okay, so with the green bits, green sections of the shell separated, you can see that the handle still stays in place. That just keeps all the springs for the catch mechanism and the trigger in place. I will obviously be stripping that apart when I come to paint it, but just for this, for right now, we don't need to worry too much about that one. The plunger tube and plunger assembly just lifts out. You have to twist this bit ever so slightly just to unhook it from the catch, which is at the back. I don't know if you can see in there. See, that bit there is the catch, so you have to unhook that from around it, and then the whole thing just lifts out like so. Okay, and then there's your plunger tube. The standard spring, the stock spring, isn't too bad. What I will be doing, as I did on the other one, is I will be adding an extra one inside it. So I couldn't tell you what spring would work. You just need one that'll fit inside there, about the same length, to be fair. So yeah, I mean, the plunger head comes off and you can just screw it back on. And then there's no point in putting any Teflon tape or plumber's tape under the O-ring, because it's quite a good seal. Just some fresh grease around that will work a treat. To get the air restrictor out, literally it's just that clip there and that clip there on the plunger tube. If you've got strong enough fingers, you should be able to do it. Otherwise, literally just leave it with a screwdriver, and then it'll just flick out. Very similar actually to the fire strike and things like that. Yeah, that one's going to be a pig. So you literally just get your screwdriver underneath it and just lift it up ever so gently. Try not to damage anything. Come on. Really. There we go. Ever so gently, and it comes apart. And then it's a very similar air restrictor spring to like a Maverick or any of the other air restrictors. It's very soft, not much good for anything. It's quite a good air restrictor. It's got a little rubber lip on it to give it a good seal, but it just holds too much back, in my view. So then you just make sure you've got it lined up the right way around. It should be exactly the same as how it came off, and then just make sure that those clips are in place. You could glue it if you wanted to. Again, be very careful. I don't know if you can see it, but I have actually slightly stressed those points, but it's solid enough. Can re-grease it, glue it, whichever. Some people do recommend drilling that bit out. I'm not a fan of that, to be fair. It doesn't really affect airflow to that great amount. And now it's just a matter of finding the spring, re-greasing it and putting that back together. But nice and easy. To take the cylinder out, you could very carefully force it if you wanted to. It will come. It can be a bit finicky to put back together. If you just lift up the cylinder ever so gently and then pull, you know, it will come out. But beware, it is only held on by that peg, which goes in the back, and that can be a bit of a finicky. If you want to, you can take the handle apart, and those two screws lift that section out, and that will come out. But that's usually how I put them back together, just because it's a bit easier, it's a bit less stress on the blaster itself. Now, for the cylinder, the actual rotation mechanism just comes out. It's as simple as that. It's designed to go in and out. That's nice and simple. And then you want to get a Phillips head screwdriver in the back and just undo the back. In the middle there's a screw, and then it'll just undo that, and then that should allow that section to come out. Now, the mistake I made on the other one is I cut every single one of these posts, and these holes are just a little bit too large, so the dart can push through if it's a bit squished or whatever. So what I plan on doing on this one is just trimming these as low as I can, so that they're not an issue, and then I can put whatever dart I want into them. And that's very easily accomplished with just a pair of clippers. So yeah, you basically clip those off, put it back in. There are alignment tags to match the cylinder up, so you don't have to worry about that. Then just screw it back together, reassemble it all, and that's that done. So see, just as low as you can, and then snip. See, nice and easy. There's not really a big problem with that. As I say, on the last one I took the actual rear pegs out, the rear mount for these, and I'm not particularly happy with how it jams occasionally, so I'm just going to trim these as low as I can. 5 and 6. So yeah, I've trimmed all it off as low as I can. Now it's just a matter of putting it back in, screwing it back together, reassembling it, finding a bigger, another spring, and then re-greasing it and testing it. So we'll get on with that momentarily. Again, you see you've got notches and bits sticking out to line it up, and then it just goes in like that. While you've got this out, just give that screw a nick up. Don't worry about taking it apart and gluing it all back together. With this clutch, you do actually need it, because this cylinder, it does sometimes over rotate when you prime it, so it's always useful to be able to nick it back one if you need to, which you wouldn't be able to do if you glued the clutch up. So, you know. Anyway, let's put the cylinder back in. As one thing I will say is, when you're reassembling a blaster, test as you go. So if you've got a rotation mech that you've removed, literally you find how it operates, and then just check that it is still doing what it needs to do. See, I mean, at the minute it's a bit, there we go, so you can see that it is rotating alright. It just needs a bit of force, obviously, because it isn't screwed together. But yeah, test it as you go, just to make sure you're reassembling it correctly, is my advice. So yeah, find a new spring now, and then assemble it. Alright, so I don't know if you can see it very well, but that's the original spring in that end, and then I've got another little spring that slots inside. It's about the same length. I advise not going longer than the original spring, because you just won't get it to compress enough for it to actually work properly, and you risk, you know, jams and things of that nature. But you can get one that's small enough. I mean, if you wanted to, you could just replace it with a stronger spring in its entirety. I'm using what I've got. I honestly couldn't tell you what blaster this other spring came out of. It's just one that got scrapped down the line and went into the bucket. So yeah, that's just doubled up that spring. Now it's just reseal, well, re-grease, reinstall, and test to make sure it works. So in terms of grease, all I'm using is just some cheap multi-purpose stuff that I got for the car, to be fair. you know, it's as good as anything. It is lithium based, which is what most other YouTube modders recommend, but I think this entire pot, which is almost like half a kilo, never going to use that much, I think it was about £5. So, you know, this will do all your grease for all your Nerf mods and more. As I say, I bought this for using on the car. It is basically the same stuff you put on like ball joints and things of that nature. So yeah, we'll throw that in and we'll give it a try. Right, well, I hope you were paying attention about, say, you know, me saying test everything, because it's not quite compressing enough. So I'm going to have to take, I think, maybe half a coil off the additional spring. It's literally maybe a millimetre off catching. So we'll maybe take half a coil, I'd say, if that. Yeah, we'll take half a coil, which is, we want to try and keep it as square as possible. So if we go to there, oh hello, right, go with the other clippers. So yeah, now we've taken it apart again. I'd like to keep the flat end at this end. This has got a fairly sizable set of mounts at this end, so it doesn't really matter too much. So we're going to take maybe half a coil off. Oh, actually we'll just take a coil off. It's always good to get yourself a good pair of snips, or heavier duty clippers, you know, like mini bolt croppers or whatever, for doing springs, because standard snips which you use on plastic just aren't enough. They won't do it. So if we take about that much off, obviously watch your eyes, watch your fingers. That is a coil. We'll try that, and then we'll keep taking off it bit by bit till it does catch. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Very basic modification. Paintwork to be done, which I will work on now, and you'll see in part 2. And that'll be it for now. So I'll see you guys in part 2. Ta-da.